And welcome to another episode of Lily High on Life. And today I am welcoming a really special guest all the way from Jerusalem at the moment. Walter Bingham, thank you so much for coming on my show.
It's a pleasure, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
And you're part of our J-Air team. You have your own show here on J-Air every week.
That's right. It's actually the same show that goes out on one of the other stations here in Israel.
And it is absolutely fascinating, some of the topics that you cover, and you do it so articulately and so well. And I must tell our audience that you are almost 98.
Yes, if God will give me, then in a month and a half I shall reach 98.
Well, one of the reasons...
That's not...
Sorry?
I'm still going strong.
Bis 120. One of the reasons I have to tell our audience this up front is because you don't sound anything like a man in his 90s, and as we proceed with the interviews, you don't act like most men who are in their 90s, and that's one of the many reasons I wanted to speak to you. So you do this weekly radio show in Israel as well as in Australia. And when you came to Israel, they told you were too old, and that was about 17 years ago.
Yeah, well, that was another station. That was the state-controlled station called Israel. And when I got in touch with them, because one of their managers who controlled the English program at the time told me they wanted me because they knew I had done radio for many years in London, in England, and when I finally arrived, and I had to get in touch with the person who was in charge of European languages. Instead of asking the question she should have asked, and that is, what's your experience, when I offered to work, she said, how old are you? And I said, I'm not telling you, I want an interview. So I went there, but and tried to sell myself for about 45 minutes. I must say, I thought they would be happy to mix experience with youth, so I could learn the technologies and the modern things, and they could learn the tricks of the trade from me. But that didn't work. I was just too old, and they didn't take me. But then, of course, the other station, Israel National Radio, which is Arutz Sheva in English, for whom I had worked before from London, they were very happy to have me and said, you can have a show. And that was called Walter's World.
And we're still
running today.
Yes, and we're very happy to have you on J-Air here in Melbourne, Australia as well.
That same show goes out on J-Air almost every week. Occasionally I give it a break, but almost every week.
What do you love about radio?
I do one more for Israel News Talk Radio. That's a station that's about 4 or 5 years old, and I have a weekly show on that as well. But of course, today these shows are podcasts, and once when I started, they were live shows where people called in and argued with me. They were, argue with Walter. But today it's all pre-recorded podcasts, which is much more difficult because a call-in show is simple. It's the caller as you make your show. You just throw out a subject or two, and then you press someone's buttons and they phone in, and after a while you throw out another couple of subjects, and more people phone in.
So Walter,
that's easy, but for a week, making a show for an hour or almost, continuous talking, as you know, that's more difficult.
well, most of my shows actually are almost an hour, and most people I have on are just fascinating. So sometimes even an hour is not quite enough. But how do you, at this stage, come up with the different topics for your radio shows each week?
Well, thankfully, I have all my faculties, as you can guess, and I'm an apolitical animal to begin with, so I am hopefully reasonably well informed about the politics in Israel and in the United States and some other countries. So things happen, and I talk about them, and then there are. For instance, I go out with my microphone, as I did this week, for instance, to the Tower of David, who were doing renovations, and I report on that, or I talk to my trusted travel advisor and talk about travel, and anything that comes up, I talk about. It's a magazine program.
And not only do you do radio, but you are also a journalist.
Well, I have two Guinness World Records. One is as the oldest working journalist in the world, and one is the oldest working radio talk show host in the world. Now, print journalism, yes, I like that too. I write frequently in the Jerusalem Post. The last article happened yesterday on Kristallnacht, of course, which is an important occasion.
Yes.
And once a month I am in the Jerusalem Report. That's published twice a month, but once a month I have something in there on all kinds of subjects.
And so how do you motivate?
I like to.
At your age, how do you motivate yourself to keep doing these things which are daily? It's daily work.
Yeah, well, I must say that I spend almost the whole week on my computer. Sometimes I just leave it and go and sit in my armchair and look at the news on TV and fall asleep for a little bit, and then back to my computer. It's a week's work too. To make a program takes me quite a long time, because once upon a time in England, and I've been in the radio business now for 55 years, I had researchers, editors, and so on. Today I have to do it all myself. And you go out and record interviews, as you know. I then edit them.
Yes.
And that takes a long time. You might have an interview for 45 minutes and have to 15 minutes have to sound as if that was seems as if that was the way they were recorded.
And Walter, you've had quite an illustrious and long career, but you've also had an illustrious and long life as well. You did many things before you went on the radio and started writing in print. Also, what's been the most fun that you've had in your life?
The most fun?
Yes.
Life is fun, you know. I look at life as it comes and deal with it and enjoy it. I enjoy my life. Whatever I do, I enjoy it. And I have one principle, of course, that if you start something like a course of languages or something like that, then don't stop in the middle, go and do it right to the end. And that that's one of my principles, that I try and get to the highest level of whatever I do.
And that, of course, actually...
I did that. I had a private pilot's license, and that's built up like building bricks. You know, you can just fly low down inside the surface, clear of clouds, in nice weather. Then you can get a license to carry passengers, another one to an additional one to get fly at night, and so on. And I had the very highest licenses, which allowed me to fly blind only on instruments.
Gosh, how old were you when you got your first license?
I did 1968, about 40 years. And I took a very sophisticated single-engined aircraft. They had to be sophisticated for that purpose. I took one from London to Israel on my own and back again. And
can you just tell us about that first flight over Israel and Jerusalem?
Well, I can tell you that it was fascinating to land in what was then called Lud, today Bingham Airport. And one day I wanted to go down. I couldn't go everywhere because with my foreign license, there were certain restrictions. But I could, for instance, go to Eilat, and I decided I will fly down to Eilat. But they didn't have the fuel in that I needed, the type of petrol that I needed at the Lud Airport or Bingham Airport. So I flew to what was then Atawot, which is the Jerusalem airport, and refueled. And then I said to the controller, "Is it possible for me to do some orbits, some circuits over Jerusalem?" And he said yes. So on my way to Eilat, before I left for Eilat, I did circuits over Jerusalem. This was my second most emotional moment in my life. I cried like a baby and tried to steer this aeroplane around over Jerusalem. So I saw, excuse me, you know, you stand on one hill in Jerusalem, on one place, you see one aspect, and you go somewhere else, and another hill, and because Jerusalem's very hilly, and you see another aspect. Here I was, over Jerusalem, seeing the whole city.
Wow.
You know, all my life I prayed to Jerusalem. All our prayers are Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And here I was. And that was very low down, I don't know, I don't know, 200 meters, 300 meters, right?
Yes.
And then I flew on to Eilat, and it got high up then under military control, and then then I got near Eilat, and the controller said, "Do you have Eilat in sight?" And I said, "Affirmative." And he said, "Be careful, it's the one on the right," because you know there are two blobs of light. One is Eilat and one is Aqaba next to it, and Aqaba is in Jordan. He warned about it. Anyway, I eventually got to Eilat.
Walter, what was it that motivated you to get a license to start with? Because back in those days, it was not that common.
Well, I'm a crazy guy. I do things that other people don't do, even now in my advanced age.
True.
And I just always wanted to fly. I love flying, and then I took this course and built up the licenses to that license that I told you about, flying blind, is the same that the commercial pilots have.
Yes.
So when you do a test, they close the windows, and you have to just fly to the
Well, Lily High on Life was actually created because I also believe that no matter what you do in life, you have to enjoy. Lily High on Life, this radio show, was created because I really believe that you have to have fun in life. You have to do what you enjoy, especially for a job. So you and I are on the same wavelength with that. I read many articles about you, and there are many, many articles written about you. None of them said you were crazy, but they did all say that you were always, your whole life, a Zionist. And that's why I love the story about flying over Jerusalem.
But I got Zionism with a mother's milk. Unfortunately, circumstances in my life prevented me from coming earlier. I was actually registered to come to Israel, to come to Palestine, at age about 14 in end of 1937, 38. But the British, as you know, didn't like us and didn't give us didn't give a license, so I couldn't come at that time. Otherwise, I'd have been here in 1937, 38. And eventually I made it, of course, much late in life.
Walter, tell us a little bit about Jerusalem today, living in Jerusalem. What's life like for a Zionist in Israel these days?
You see, there are so many troubles for Jews today, and anti-Semitism everywhere in the world. We also in Israel have our problems, as you know, with our neighbors and generally. But if you have to live with problems, then I suggest you might as well live with the problems in our own country. And that's the way I look at it. It's difficult to live anywhere today as a Jew. And so come here. And what's life like in Jerusalem, in Israel today? You know, when you read the foreign media or you talk to people abroad, they think you get shot on every street corner and you can't come. I mean, there are big organizations like Ford and Toyota who used to do trips for their senior executives. None of those come now because the insurances won't cover it. They're frightened. People have got the wrong idea about Israel. Israel is a wonderful place. It's quiet. I've never heard a shot here in Jerusalem. Of course, look, everywhere in the world there are areas where you would rather not go to, that you would avoid, where there could be trouble, and we've got them here, but you just don't go. You don't go there.
But walking,
and it's good to live without it. In Stockholm, in Sweden, in Malmö, there are. I'm very well acquainted with Sweden. There are no-go areas where even the police doesn't go. This is where the new immigrants from the Middle East have settled. And have areas where you would never, I won't hang around
in Jerusalem.
I wouldn't hang around Damascus Gate, for instance.
Yes.
I pass by and hang around there because that's not a place to be. So, apart from that, it's quite... If you or the walk in Jerusalem, you wouldn't notice that there were any problems.
Yes.
And I must tell you, this business about apartheid that they compare us with the then South Africa. For instance, you sit in a tram or in a bus next to the Arabs, you go to the hospitals, you sit in the waiting room on the same bench next to our Arab neighbors. You get treated by an Arab nurse and an Arab doctor who are wonderful. So people don't see that. People only see the bad things. These are the good things. Do live together. In my view, there are thousands upon thousands of Arabs in Jerusalem alone who love to be here, but they can't say it loud because they may get hurt by their own people.
And Walter, I know that also,
we live in harmony here with our Arab neighbors who live in Jerusalem, for instance.
Yes, I've been to Israel
and some of them are even moving to Jewish areas because they are afraid that there could be an arrangement for a Palestinian state, and their village could be incorporated in that, and that's what they don't want. So they move to Israeli areas. They love to be here.
There are a couple of political conversations I'd love to have with you, but I'm more interested in you yourself because you really have lived many lifetimes. You drove an ambulance during the war and you received the highest medals and awards for your bravery during that period when you were in the army. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like? Because you were in the British Army, but you really took it upon yourself, and your conduct during that time, from what I've read, was just exemplary.
Well, yeah, I served 4 years in the British Army. And the first 2 years, I landed in the water on the beaches of Normandy. Mm-hmm. And then fought over the ambulance. I never killed anybody, I only saved lives. And went through right up into Belgium. And I agitated continually that I speak German. And surely we're going into Germany and you need German speakers. Anybody with some training, and you need a bit of training, can drive an ambulance. But don't you need German speakers? And they wouldn't release me initially because every unit was under strength. They lost a lot of men. And then just before a very pivotal battle over a bridge over the River Rhine in Nijmegen, they actually transferred me and sent me back to London from the battlefield. Can you imagine the contrast? I had a bath for the first time.
Wow.
Wonderful. And I was trained, there was an office, secret office at Oxford Circus above a department store that no longer exists, under the roof. And there I was trained as a document specialist and other things. And then served in counterintelligence and eventually finished up in Hamburg. I make it short. I was in Brussels waiting for a job and then was sent to Hamburg. On the day Hamburg fell, and that was the day the war ended in Europe, and worked in Hamburg doing all kinds of jobs. I wasn't entitled to do anything I liked. I have permits here to wear officers. I was a sergeant. Officers insignia. They made civilian clothes for me for my job. My car was a blue open BMW, not a military car. And I did all kinds of work. But I want to tell you about, and I interviewed Nazis that were caught in preliminary interviews. And the highest Nazi that I interviewed was the Nazi foreign minister Joachim von Ribbentrop. Mm-hmm. He was used to be ambassador in London, then he became the Nazi foreign minister, and he was in charge. He was to oversee that all the Einsatztruppen, all the units that did all the atrocities in their so-called occupied territories, that they did their job. And I asked him, Ribbentrop, can you tell me something about the final solution. That was the only term there was at that time. And he said, I didn't know anything about that. It was the Führer.
Oh, my God.
And I was flabbergasted. But as an intelligence officer, I couldn't do anything. I had to stiff upper lip. I had to be British. And though I could have choked him, but I could only ask more questions. And then I said to him, so now you heard about it, of course. How did you find out? And he said he read it in the newspaper, which is a paper that we published. Asked a few more questions and sent him on his way. He was the very first to be hanged after the Nuremberg war crimes trials.
Yeah, the word chutzpah, when it comes to that, the way they lied and tried to cover up, but it was a horrible time in our lives. I must let people know also that you weren't just saving lives as an ambulance driver, you actually performed many acts over and above being an ambulance driver, and were awarded medals for the bravery that you showed and the people that you saved while during that time in the field as well.
All the refugee soldiers, Lily, who were in the army had a different motive from the normal British soldier. A British soldier was in the army because he had to go. Or he felt he had to fight for his country. Mm-hmm. Now, we refugee soldiers didn't have a country to. Certainly not the country of my birth, Germany, not Britain, just. Our motivation was such strong, but it was fighting against Nazis. So the things I did was not so other people did. Yes, they happened to see something I did in the battle and awarded me the military medal. It's not the highest medal; it's a high medal from the king. But that was our motivation. Finish the war, find our relatives, and finish off the Nazis. Then eventually, much later, the French gave me what was their highest honor.
What was your involvement with the French as well?
No, that was.
I'm sorry. What was? Could you just repeat that about the French?
The French gave me that honor only a few years ago, because I was concerned with the battles in Normandy and
yes,
and that came to light. So they brought a French warship to Haifa, a French warship that happened to cruise in the Mediterranean, and I thought, oh, there'll be a lot of us, and they asked me to come in. But I was the only one. I stood on the helicopter pad, and they made a big fuss on all the soldiers and everything. It was very nice.
Very nice.
I have that today. This is.
Now, Walter,
Actually, I'm invited on the 11th to the residence of the French ambassador. I'm not sure if I can get there because there is the armistice commemoration.
Very, very nice that they still remember you, that they still honour you and remember you.
Oh, yes.
Very nice.
Then I go with two hats. I'm also a journalist. I'm involved with a lot of the embassies here. But the most important occasion, this will be the 9th of November, which is, of course...
just in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Walter, you were also one of the children on the Kindertransport from Germany to England, and were fortunate enough after the war to actually be reunited with your mother. Do you remember much about the time that you spent in England and the family you were with? Okay.
Now, you asked about the Kindertransport. Well, that term, it was a collective term. There was input from all kinds of places. And it started, the Kindertransport started. Now, the Jewish organizations in Germany and Austria were concerned about the children, contacted the charitable organizations in England and said, can you do something about our children? Well, it's a long story anyway. They contacted the British government. The British government agreed to take 10,000 supposed to be Jewish. But there was input from everywhere. Some children went to foster parents, others went to hostels, some went to family. It was just a collective term, and it lasted about 8 months. There were different transports. I was on the transport just 1 month before war broke out. But the problem about that was it was unaccompanied children, no parents. So can you imagine, it was just before the outbreak of war. Everybody knew there would be war, and everybody knew that it can't be any better for Jews. And yet the parents, such heroes, sent their children away. Now, I was 15 and a half, and I knew I was streetwise. I was living under the Nazis, so I knew why I was going. And there were young children, like 4-year-olds. Or who were brought to the train by their parents, the parents outside, the children in the train. Mommy, I love you, what have I done? They thought they'd been punished. The trauma was tremendous, and the parents were great heroes. Yeah. And I can tell you, 90% of the children ever showed their parents again. I was one of the minute percentage who managed to united with one parent, with my mother, who went of us, and we got a real I was very, very in England. With the religious Zionist youth movement, and their youth movement, the youth section of that movement became, in fact, Bnei Akiva. So I am, I suppose, one of the oldest Bnei Akiva boys in the world. So I was on what effectively a kibbutz, where if you had a torn pants, you went to the store and they gave you another pair. It was run on real old socialist kibbutz lines. And I was there for a few years, and then I left and went to work.
Very interesting, because I thought if all children were actually bordered with families, and there were not such great stories.
Some went to families, indeed.
Yes.
Some went into hostels, and rather like to choose a dog in the dog home, people came and chose a child.
Yes.
Actually, that's how it was. There was a very famous family who had 2 boys who became very famous. Attenborough. Don't know if you know.
Yes, of course. Yes.
The other one, famous naturalist. The Attenborough family took 2 sisters, 2 girls. I mean, some went to non-Jewish families like Attenborough. They took 2 girls, and the story is that the parents asked at that time, he says, okay, we take 2 children, but then you'll have to share. They said yes, Richard and David Attenborough.
Wow.
And the girls eventually found a family in America.
Certainly. And then... how did you find your mother after the war? Was it the organizations that were putting people together, or...?
It was through the Red Cross and also searches, and she got in touch with her sisters who lived in America. She knew where to get in touch. and that's how we eventually. I still have telegrams. You know, today it's Instagram. But once upon a time there were telegrams that went around. I still have telegrams from those days where information was passed that somebody that they have found each other. And so
yes, it's just amazing. Without the technology or anything, people were still able to find each other and reconnect. You know, it's children today.
There's a case this week in the newspaper where somebody just found a cousin.
Yes.
After the war.
And
they didn't know. There are still people finding each other today.
Thank God.
They're old, but they find each other.
And then so you lived in England for a while, and you got married, and you gave your mother nachas.
Yeah, well, you see, my mother came together with a whole group. She was in labor camps all around the East, and the group that she was with, they came together. They were picked up once they got into Germany. They were in prison. They worked in stone quarries, and then they were picked up by Count Volker Bernadotte and the Swedish Red Cross, and came to Sweden. She was safe and taken to Sweden. Now, at that time, I didn't have much. I couldn't even give her the kind of life that she would have in Sweden with her support group. They were support each other, they knew each other, they worked together, they went through all the troubles together. And so she lived in Sweden, became a Swedish citizen. When it was established that my father was no longer alive, she married another Holocaust survivor and lived to the end of her life in Sweden. That was like a second home for me. I used to go there continually. In fact, with my aeroplane, I used to fly there.
How wonderful. Your life has been, you know, when you talk about the ups and downs of life, you've certainly lived many extremes of despair, extremes of joy, just lots and lots of extremes. No wonder you don't sound like you're anywhere near ready to finish yet. What are you still planning now?
I have a very, as you can hear, it's just my radio voice. I must.
We've lost you for a minute. You were saying...
I don't know my age. The only time I realize my age is when I pass a mirror.
I love that.
Good day. And I feel like 40, and on a bad day, like 50.
Just really wonderful. And it's...
I go everywhere.
Are there still things you'd like to do?
Yes, in the house. I left the house yesterday at just after 9 in the morning, and I got back at 4. I went to all kinds of places, including the president's residence, when anything is going on there.
God bless you, Walter Bingham. Is there anything that you still have on your list that you'd like to do?
Yes, well, I did it once. I did for my 95th birthday. I did a skydive. I jumped out of an aeroplane in tandem, of course. Jumped out of a plane at 13.
That's just wonderful.
I'm going to do that again. Maybe beginning of next year when it gets warmer again. I don't know.
Is there anything that you fear?
I don't.
Is there anything that you fear?
I'm looking for some crazy idea. I'm looking for some other crazy ideas because I do the things as and now that other people my age don't do. I was going to suggest that I should go do a bungee jump, but daughter said no, bungee jumps is upside down and bumps, and you're hanging by your feet, and that's really not advisable for you at your age. So I'm not going to do a bungee jump. I might go and be dragged in the air. The boats go on the water and they drag some parachute. So I might go and hang one of those, perhaps.
Well,
I'm looking for something crazy.
I absolutely look forward to welcoming you to Australia sometime as well. I won't find anything that crazy for you because we'd just be honoured to have you here, and we want to see you safely back to Israel when you come. But I will connect you with the B'nai Akiva movement, which is quite strong here in Melbourne, Australia as well.
I have been over 3 years ago. I came and I was there for a year. I actually at the and I met a lot of people, and the founder of the Robert Bonchek occasionally comes here.
Yes.
And we meet and have
Walter, it's been an absolute pleasure and honour to interview you. You sound like you have far more energy than a lot of the people that I deal with that are half your age in Australia. So may you continue bis hinderdens Fonsik and beyond.
This is very important because you see, I must tell you, it's now 20 years since the Twin Towers were attacked. And that in my memory, like yesterday. So what's 20 years when you're my age, 98, another nearly 100, another 20 years, and there's 120, not enough. Where I go to shul, they say that is Chabad. They say 180, and I accept that, and then I said, when we get there, we'll talk again.
I love it. Walter, thank you so much, and look forward to meeting you in person, either in Israel or here in Melbourne. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you very much.
Or as I say in Israel, lehitraot, which is much nicer than goodbye.
Lehitraot.
Lehitraot. Bye.